My name is Josh Spark, and I'm a journalism student. Not the most glamorous of career paths, I know, but it's got its perks. For one, it feeds my insatiable curiosity, my need to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, to find the story behind the story. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you stumble upon something truly extraordinary. Something like the video. It all started, as many strange things do these days, on the internet. Not on the shiny, curated surfaces of social media, but in the murky depths of an obscure online forum. A place where conspiracy theorists, paranormal enthusiasts, and insomniacs gather to trade stories and speculate about the unknown. I was there, researching a piece for my investigative journalism class, something about urban legends and their enduring appeal. I was scrolling through endless threads about cryptids, UFO sightings, and government cover-ups, when a title caught my eye. The Lines That Connect Us. The Lost 1992 Video. Intrigued, I clicked. The post was short and to the point. It described a video, supposedly filmed in 1992 by a man who later disappeared without a trace. The video, according to the poster, contained footage of a series of strange events, all linked by a common thread, a peculiar white birthmark shared by all the victims of the disappearances. The poster claimed that the video suggested a connection between these seemingly unrelated cases, a hidden pattern that had been overlooked by the authorities. He called it the Video of the White Lines, but also mentioned its original title, The Lines That Connect Us. It was exactly the kind of story that got my journalistic senses tingling. A missing person, a mysterious video, a hint of something sinister lurking beneath the surface. It was too good to resist. I was certain that this was simply a way to attract attention to the forum, but I was still intrigued. I started digging, searching for any information I could find about the video, the missing man, the alleged disappearances. I scoured online databases, newspaper archives, and even reached out to a few contacts I had in the world of amateur investigation. Most of my inquiries led to dead ends. The video, it seemed, was nothing more than an urban legend, a story whispered in the dark corners of the internet. There were no records of any disappearances linked to a white birthmark, no mention of a man who had vanished while investigating such a case. But then, I found something. In the archives of our university library, buried deep within a collection of old, forgotten newspapers, I found a series of articles about a missing persons case from 1992. The man's name was Alistair Campbell, and he had disappeared while investigating a series of disappearances in a remote area of Scotland. The articles didn't mention a video or a birthmark, but there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. According to the reports, Campbell was obsessed with the idea that the disappearances were connected, that there was a pattern that nobody else could see. He believed that the victims were linked by something more than just circumstance, something deeper. It was a long shot, but it was the first real piece of evidence I had found that supported the story of the video. Could Alistair Campbell be the missing man from the forum post? Was it possible that he had filmed something that had led to his disappearance? It was certainly odd that the articles made a point to mention how fixated he was on patterns. Needed help. I needed someone who could help me make sense of all this, someone who could see the connections I was starting to glimpse. I needed Ellie. Ellie Carter was a classmate of mine, a fellow journalism student. She was everything I wasn't. Rational, skeptical, grounded in logic and reason. She was the Scully to my Mulder, the Watson to my Holmes. She was also one of the smartest people I knew, and she had a knack for finding the truth, even when it was buried beneath layers of deception. I found her in the student lounge, hunched over her laptop, probably working on another one of her meticulously researched articles. "Hey, Ellie," I said, pulling up a chair beside her. "Got a minute?" She looked up, her expression skeptical. "What is it, Josh?" she asked. "Another one of your wild goose chases?" "Maybe," I said, grinning. "But this one's interesting, I promise." Told her about the forum post, about the video, about Alistair Campbell and the missing persons case. I told her about the strange birthmark, the alleged connection between the victims, the idea that there was a hidden pattern, a secret network of lines connecting seemingly unrelated events. She listened patiently, her expression unchanging, but I could see the flicker of interest in her eyes. "It's just an urban legend, Josh," she said when I was finished. A story. There's no evidence, no proof. But what about Alistair Campbell? I countered. What about the missing persons case? It's too much of a coincidence, don't you think? She sighed. Coincidences happen, Josh. It doesn't mean there's some grand conspiracy. But what if there is? I pressed. What if there's something more to this? What if the video is real? She was silent for a moment, considering. I knew she was intrigued, despite her skepticism. The journalist in her couldn't resist a good mystery, even if she thought it was a waste of time. There was a detail in one of the articles, she finally said, a thoughtful expression on her face. One of the missing people, a woman named Fiona Mackenzie. She was originally from Scotland. My grandmother was Scottish, from a small town near where this Fiona lived. It might be worth looking into, I suppose. That was all the encouragement I needed. So you'll help me? I asked, trying to contain my excitement. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Fine, she said. But if it turns out to be nothing, you owe me big time. Deal, I said, grinning. And so, our investigation began. We spent the next few days in the university library, poring over old newspapers, maps, and historical records. We followed the trail of Alistair Campbell, piecing together his investigation, trying to understand what he had been looking for, what he had found. The deeper we dug, the more convinced I became that there was something to the story of the video. There were too many coincidences, too many unanswered questions. Why had Campbell been so obsessed with the idea of a pattern? What had he seen that made him believe the disappearances were connected? And what had happened to him? Ellie remained skeptical, but even she had to admit that there was something strange about the case. The disappearances, the remote location, the lack of any clear motive or explanation. It was all very unsettling. Then, one afternoon, while searching through a box of old microfilms, I found something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a small, unlabeled cassette tape, tucked away in a corner of the box. It looked like it had been there for years, forgotten, overlooked. I carefully examined the tape. It was old, the kind used for audio recordings in the early 90s. There was no label, no indication of what it contained. But I had a feeling, a gut instinct, that this was something important. Could it be related to Alistair Campbell's investigation? Could it be a part of the lost video? I rushed to find a cassette player, my hands trembling with anticipation. I inserted the tape, pressed play, and held my breath. At first, there was nothing, just static. But then, I heard it. A faint sound, a low hum, followed by a series of clicks and pops. And then, a voice. It was a man's voice, distorted and muffled, but definitely there. He was speaking in a low, urgent tone, as if he were trying not to be overheard. I strained to hear what he was saying, but the audio quality was terrible. It was like trying to listen to a conversation through a thick wall. But then I heard it. A few words, clear as a bell, that sent a shiver down my spine. The lines, they connect. Us all. The voice was cut short by a sudden burst of static, and then, silence. I rewound the tape, played it again and again, trying to decipher the rest of the message, but it was no use. The audio was too degraded, too distorted. But those few words were enough. They confirmed my suspicions, validated my obsession. The video was real. Alistair Campbell had found something, and whatever it was, it had something to do with lines. Lines that connected people, places, events. I looked at Ellie, my eyes wide with excitement. "Did you hear that?" I asked. She nodded, her expression a mixture of apprehension and fascination. "The lines," she said. "He said something about lines. The lines that connect us all," I repeated, the words echoing in my mind. The mystery had just deepened. We had a fragment of the puzzle, a tantalizing glimpse of the truth. But what did it mean? What were the lines? And how did they connect the missing people? We had a long way to go, but we had a starting point, and we had each other. As I looked at Ellie, I knew that this was just the beginning of our journey. A journey that would take us far from the familiar world of our university, into a realm of ancient secrets, hidden connections, and a mystery that would challenge everything we thought we knew about the world. a mystery that might just consume us both. The call to investigation had been sounded, and we had answered. Now, there was no turning back. The game was afoot, and the stakes were higher than we could have ever imagined. The white lines beckoned, and we, like moths to a flame, were drawn to their enigmatic glow, unsure of whether they would lead us to salvation or destruction. The fragment of audio, those few distorted words, the lines, they connect us all, echoed in my mind, a tantalizing clue to a mystery that was growing more complex by the minute. We had proof that the video, or at least part of it, was real. But what did it mean? What were these lines that Alistair Campbell had been so obsessed with? We needed an expert, someone who could shed some light on the historical and cultural context of the case, someone who could help us understand the meaning behind the cryptic phrase. That's when I thought of Professor Graham Keller. Professor Keller was an anthropologist, a specialist in ancient cultures, folklore, and local myths. He was also one of my mentors, a man who had always encouraged my curiosity and my passion for uncovering hidden truths. I found him in his office, a cluttered space filled with books, artifacts, and maps. He was a tall, imposing figure, with a shock of gray hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. I explained the situation to him, telling him about the video, the missing persons case, Alistair Campbell, and the fragment of audio we had found. I also mentioned Fiona Mackenzie, the missing woman who had ties to Scotland. He listened intently, his expression thoughtful, stroking his chin as he absorbed the information. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on some distant point in space. "Fascinating," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This sounds like something more than just a simple missing persons case." "That's what we thought," Ellie chimed in, speaking for the first time since we had entered the office. "But we need your help to understand what we're dealing with. The key, I suspect, lies in the phrase, 'the lines that connect us all,'" Professor Keller said, turning his attention to the audio recording. "Play it for me again, will you?" I played the fragment, and he listened intently, his eyes closed, as if trying to decipher the hidden meaning behind the distorted words. "There's something familiar about that phrase," he said, when the recording ended. "Something ancient." He stood up and walked over to a bookshelf, pulling out a thick, leather-bound volume. He flipped through the pages, his fingers tracing the lines of text, until he finally stopped at a particular passage. "Here it is," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "There's an old Scottish legend, a myth about a group known as the Guardians of the Connection. They were said to be a secret society, a sect that guarded ancient knowledge, the knowledge of the lines." "The lines?" I asked, exchanging a look with Ellie. "Ley lines," Professor Keller explained. "Invisible lines of energy that crisscross the earth, connecting sacred sites, ancient monuments, places of power. According to the legend, the Guardians believed that these lines were not just geographical features, but also conduits, channels, of some kind of energy, a force that could be used to connect people, places, even times. A bit like the video suggested," Ellie added, "that these lines connect everyone." "Precisely," the professor nodded. "The legend says that the Guardians had rituals, ceremonies, designed to tap into the power of the lines. They believed that they could use this power to transcend the limitations of the physical world, to achieve a higher state of consciousness, to connect on a level we can scarcely imagine." He paused, then added, "There are even stories of the Guardians using these lines to travel vast distances, to appear and disappear at will. And some tales say they could manipulate time itself, though those are likely exaggerations. Likely. It was a lot to take in. Ley lines, ancient sects, rituals, connections across time and space. It sounded like something out of a fantasy novel, not a real-world investigation. But then again, we had a recording that seemed to allude to these very things, and a missing persons case that might be connected to it all." "Professor," I asked, "do you think there's any truth to these legends?" He looked at me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "In my line of work, Mr. Spark," he said, "you learn that there's often a kernel of truth behind even the most fantastical of stories, myths, and legends. They don't just spring from nothing. They're based on something real, something that happened, something that people saw, even if the details have been distorted and embellished over time. And the disappearances? Ellie asked. Do you think they could be connected to this? It's possible, he replied. The legend of the Guardians is often associated with tales of people vanishing without a trace, especially near ancient sites, places where the lines are said to converge. Stone circles, for example. Stone circles. The image flashed in my mind, the same image from the forum that had started it all. Professor, I said, do you know anything about stone circles in Scotland? Particularly near the area where Fiona Mackenzie was from? He smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. As a matter of fact, I do, he said. There are quite a few of them in that region. One, in particular, is quite famous, or rather, infamous. It's called the Altar of Connections. Local legend has it that it was a particularly potent site for the Guardians, a place where they performed their most powerful rituals. The Altar of Connections. The name sent a shiver down my spine. It sounded like the perfect place for Alistair Campbell to have conducted his investigation, and the perfect place for us to continue ours. We need to go there, I said, turning to Ellie. To Scotland. Ellie, to my surprise, didn't object. She simply nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of apprehension and determination. All right, she said. Let's go find some answers. Professor Keller offered us his assistance, providing us with maps, books, and contacts in Scotland who might be able to help us. He also gave us a warning. Be careful, he said, his voice grave. If there's any truth to these legends, if the Guardians are still active, they won't take kindly to outsiders prying into their secrets. They're said to be quite protective of their knowledge, and quite ruthless. We thanked him for his help and left his office, our minds buzzing with new information, new possibilities, new dangers. As we walked, Ellie pulled out her phone, doing some quick research. I found something, she said, showing me the screen. There's an old police report from the time of the disappearances. It mentions that the victims all had a peculiar birthmark, a series of white lines arranged in a specific pattern. She showed me a sketch of the birthmark, and my blood ran cold. It was a pattern I had seen before. It's the same pattern as the numbers on the record, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The musical key. And, added Ellie, the same pattern appears on ancient standing stones in Scotland, in various locations, including near the Altar of Connections. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, revealing a picture that was both fascinating and terrifying. The birthmark, the inscription, the lines, the video, the disappearances. They were all connected, all part of the same intricate web. As we continued our research, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Curiosity is a virtue, but it can also be a curse, the message read. I've seen the video. I know its secrets. Meet me if you dare. But be warned, some doors are best left unopened. A chill ran down my spine. Someone was watching us. Someone who knew about our investigation. Someone who claimed to have seen the full video. Who is this? I typed back, my fingers trembling. The reply came almost immediately. Someone who can help you, but only if you're willing to listen. I know where the answers are. Then, a set of coordinates. A location in Scotland, near the Altar of Connections. It was a risk, a gamble, but we couldn't ignore it. We had come too far to turn back now. We're going to Scotland, I said, turning to Ellie. She nodded, her expression resolute. We're going to Scotland, she echoed. And so, our journey began. A journey into the heart of an ancient mystery. A journey that would test our courage, our resolve, and our very understanding of reality. A journey that would lead us to a remote corner of Scotland, to a circle of standing stones, and to a confrontation with a secret that had been hidden for centuries. The lines were calling to us, and we were about to answer. The journey to Scotland was a blur of airports, train stations, and Bahara cars. We traveled north from London, the landscape gradually shifting from the urban sprawl of the city to the rolling hills and rugged beauty of the Scottish Highlands. The closer we got to our destination, the more I felt a sense of anticipation, a feeling that we were on the verge of something significant. The coordinates from the anonymous message led us to a small, isolated village nestled in a valley, surrounded by towering mountains and ancient forests. It was a place that felt untouched by time, a place where the modern world seemed a distant memory. We checked into a small, family-run inn, the only one in the village. The owner, a stout, broad woman with a warm smile and a thick Scottish accent, regarded us with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Here for the stones, are ye?" she asked as she handed us our keys. "Yes," I replied. "We're interested in the local history." "Aye, well, there's plenty of that around here," she said. "But be careful. Some things are best left undisturbed." It was a warning we had heard before, a sentiment that seemed to be shared by everyone who knew about the video and the mystery surrounding it, but it only strengthened my resolve to uncover the truth. We spent the afternoon exploring the village, trying to get a feel for the place, trying to find someone who could tell us more about the altar of connections and the legends that surrounded it. Most of the villagers were tight-lipped, unwilling to discuss the old stories with outsiders, but we eventually found someone who was willing to talk. Liam Fraser was a local historian, a man in his early 40s with a rugged, outdoorsy look and a passion for the history and folklore of his homeland. We met him in the village pub, a cozy, dimly lit establishment filled with the scent of peat smoke and stale beer. We told him about our investigation, about the video, the missing persons case, and the connection to the altar of connections. He listened intently, his eyes gleaming with interest. "I've heard the stories," he said when we were finished. "The old tales about the guardians, the lines, the disappearances. Most folks dismiss them as myths, but I've always believed there was more to it than that." He told us about the altar of connections, a stone circle located a few miles outside the village, in a remote area of the Highlands. It was said to be one of the most powerful sites in Scotland, a place where the ley lines converged, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. "Alistair Campbell, the investigator you mentioned," Liam said. "I've researched his work. He was here, years ago. He spent weeks exploring the altar, taking measurements, making notes. He believed that the stones held the key to understanding the disappearances." "Do you know what happened to his research?" I asked. "Did he leave anything behind?" Liam shook his head. "If he did, it's long gone now," he said. "But I can take you to the altar, show you what he saw." We agreed to meet Liam the next morning, and he offered to guide us to the stone circle. As we left the pub, I felt a surge of excitement. We were finally getting closer to the truth. The next day, we set out on foot, following Liam through the rugged, breathtaking landscape of the Highlands. The air was crisp and clean, and the scenery was stunning, a panorama of rolling hills, jagged peaks, and sparkling lochs. After several hours of hiking, we reached the altar of connections. It was a circle of standing stones, arranged in a precise pattern on a small hill overlooking the valley. The stones were weathered and worn, covered in moss and lichen, but they still radiated a sense of power, a sense of ancient mystery. As I stood there gazing at the stones, I felt a strange connection to the place, a feeling that I was standing on the threshold of something profound. It was as if the stones themselves were humming with energy, vibrating with a frequency I could almost feel in my bones. Liam led us around the circle, pointing out various features, explaining their significance. He showed us the intricate carvings on some of the stones, symbols that matched the birthmark from the police report. The same symbols found on other standing stones throughout Scotland, and the same ones on the partial Infinite Harmony manuscript. These symbols, he explained, are ancient, much older than the stones themselves. They predate even the Celts. Some believe they're a form of writing, a language we've yet to decipher. While Liam talked, I noticed something else, something that sent a chill down my spine. On the ground, near the center of the circle, were the remnants of an old campsite. A few rusted tent pegs, a scattering of ashes, and, half buried in the dirt, a piece of equipment. It was a camera, an old analog video camera, the kind that would have been used in the early 1990s. It was badly damaged, corroded by time and the elements, but it was still recognizable. And it was the same model of camera that Alistair Campbell was known to have used. Could this be his? Had he left it here all those years ago? We carefully examined the camera, but it was too far gone to salvage. Whatever footage it might have contained was lost forever, or so we thought. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the stones, we decided to head back to the village. We had found no trace of the video, but we had found something else, something just as important. We had found the place where it all began, the place where Alistair Campbell had conducted his investigation, the place where the lines converged. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept glancing back, scanning the surrounding hills, but I saw nothing. Just the wind rustling through the heather, and the shadows lengthening in the fading light. But the feeling persisted, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, a sense of being observed by unseen eyes. "Do you feel that?" I asked Ellie, keeping my voice low. She nodded, her eyes darting around nervously. "I do," she said. "Like we're not alone." Liam, walking ahead of us, seemed oblivious to our unease. Or perhaps he was used to it. Perhaps he knew that this was a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where the past and the present, the living and the dead, could easily intersect. As darkness fell, the feeling intensified. I could hear whispers in the wind, voices, murmuring just beyond the range of hearing. I could see shadows moving in the periphery of my vision, shapes that disappeared when I turned to look. We were not alone, and then I saw her. A figure, standing on a ridge overlooking the path ahead. A woman, tall and slender, silhouetted against the fading light. She was too far away to make out any details, but I could feel her gaze, her eyes fixed on us. She stood there for a moment, motionless, watching us. Then, she raised her hand as if in greeting or perhaps a warning. And then, she was gone. Vanished into the gathering darkness. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ellie and Liam both nodded, their faces pale in the dim light. "Who was that?" Ellie asked. "I don't know," I said. "But I have a feeling we'll be seeing her again." We continued walking, our pace quickening, our senses on high alert. The idyllic landscape of the Highlands had suddenly taken on a more sinister aspect, the shadows seeming to hide unseen dangers, the silence broken only by the whispers of the wind. We had come to Scotland seeking answers, but we had found something else, something that suggested the mystery of the video was far more complex, far more dangerous than we had ever imagined. We had found the heart of the mystery, but we had also found something else, something that was watching us, waiting for us, hunting us. The encounter with the mysterious figure on the ridge left us shaken and on edge. We hurried back to the village, the sense of being watched clinging to us like a second skin. Even the cozy interior of the inn offered little comfort, the shadows in the corners of the room seeming to shift and writhe with a life of their own. We decided to retire early, hoping to get some rest before continuing our investigation the next day. But sleep was hard to come by. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside had me jumping at shadows, my mind replaying the image of the woman on the ridge, her silent gaze, her ambiguous gesture. Who was she, and what did she want from us? The next morning, we met Liam for breakfast, eager to discuss our next move. We told him about the figure we had seen, and his reaction was not encouraging. "It could be her," he said, his expression grave. "Moira. There have been rumors, sightings. It's said she knows the old ways, the ways of the Guardians." "The Guardians?" I asked. "You think she's connected to them?" "Perhaps," Liam replied. "Or perhaps she's something else. Something older." He was interrupted by a commotion at the entrance of the inn. The door opened and a figure stepped inside. It was the woman from the ridge. She was tall and slender, with long dark hair that cascaded down her back. She wore simple, practical clothes, but there was an air of authority about her, a sense of power that seemed to fill the room. Her eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the occupants of the inn until they landed on us. She walked towards our table, her movements fluid and graceful. Liam stood up, his expression wary, but she simply nodded to him and took a seat beside me, her gaze fixed on my face. "You're the one who's been asking questions," she said, her voice low and melodic with a hint of a Scottish accent. "The one who seeks the video." "And you are?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They call me Moira," she replied. "And you're Josh Spark, the journalist." "How do you know my name?" I asked, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. "I know many things," she said, her eyes seeming to bore into my soul. "I know about the record, about the lines, about the disappearances." "Are you one of the Guardians?" Ellie asked, her voice sharp. Moira smiled, a cryptic, enigmatic smile. "The Guardians are gone," she said. "Their time has passed, but their legacy remains." "What do you want from us?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "I want to help you," she said. "I want to show you the truth." "Why?" Ellie asked, her skepticism evident. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I'm the only one who can tell you what really happened," Moira replied. "I'm the only one who knows the true story of the video, and the only one who can help you understand its power and stop those who wish to use it." She told us that she had once been a member of a group, a modern iteration of the Guardians, dedicated to protecting the knowledge of the lines, the power of the ancient sites. But she had left them, disillusioned by their methods, their crumsh, distorted interpretation of the old ways. "They seek to control the lines," she explained, "to use their power for their own selfish ends. They believe they can harness the energy of the stones, of the video, to manipulate people, to control the world." "The Resonance Initiative," I said, remembering Langford's words. Moira nodded. "They are a corruption of the old ways," she said, "a perversion of the truth. They must be stopped." She told us that the video, the lines that connect us, was not just a record of disappearances. It was a document of a ritual, a ceremony designed to tap into the power of the lines, to connect the minds of those who watched it, to create a collective consciousness. "But something went wrong," Moira said. "The ritual was flawed. It created a link, yes, but it was unstable, unpredictable. It drove people mad. It led to the disappearances." "And Alistair Campbell?" I asked. "What happened to him?" "He came too close to the truth," she said. "He found the video, or part of it. He understood its power, and they silenced him." "They?" Ellie asked. "The ones who still follow the old ways?" Moira said. "The ones who seek to control the lines. They're still out there, watching, waiting." She then revealed a shocking detail. The reason she had sought us out. The reason she was willing to help us. "The video," she said, her voice low and intense. "It's incomplete. There's a missing piece, a final segment, and you, Josh, you are the key to finding it." "Me?" I asked, bewildered. "Why me?" "Because of your family," she said. "Your ancestry. You have a connection to this place, to the lines, to the power they hold. A connection you don't even know. You have." She wouldn't elaborate, but her words sent a shiver down my spine. "My family? What did my family have to do with any of this?" I had never considered my lineage particularly interesting or relevant. Moira's revelation had turned the investigation on its head. It was no longer just about a missing video and a series of disappearances. It was about something much bigger, something that touched upon the very fabric of reality. And it was about me. "We need to find the missing segment of the video," Moira said. "It's the key to understanding the ritual, to stopping them." "But where is it?" Ellie asked. "I don't know," Moira admitted. "But I know where to start looking." She suggested we return to the Altar of Connections. She believed that Alistair Campbell had left something behind, a clue, a message, something that could help us find the missing segment of the video. "We need to retrace his steps," she said. "We need to see what he saw, feel what he felt, and we needed to do it at night. Under the same conditions in which he had filmed the original video. It was a risk, a dangerous gamble, but we had come too far to turn back now. We had a chance to uncover the truth, to stop those who sought to exploit the power of the lines, and perhaps to find out what role I was destined to play in this unfolding drama. My unknown connection." As darkness fell, we prepared to return to the Altar of Connections, this time with Moira as our guide. The sense of anticipation, of impending revelation, was almost palpable. We were about to step back into the heart of the mystery, to confront the power of the lines, and to face whatever awaited us in the darkness. The enigma of the lines was about to be revealed, and I had a feeling that it would change everything. Under the cloak of darkness, we returned to the altar of connections, the ancient stone circle that held the key to the mystery of the video. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The silence, broken only by the rustling of the wind and the distant hooting of an owl. The air itself seemed to crackle with an energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Moira led the way, her movements sure and confident, as if she were a part of the landscape itself. Liam followed close behind, his face grim, his hand never far from the heavy walking stick he carried. Ellie and I brought up the rear, our senses on high alert, our hearts pounding in our chests. As we approached the circle, I could feel the energy emanating from the stones, a low hum that vibrated deep within my bones. It was a feeling I had experienced before, during our first visit, but now it was stronger, more intense, as if the stones themselves were awakening. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast long, eerie shadows across the stones, making them seem like silent sentinels, guarding a secret too ancient and powerful for human comprehension. "This is it," Moira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where the ritual took place." She indicated the center of the circle, where the remnants of Alistair Campbell's campsite were still visible. It was here that he had filmed the video, here that he had sought to unlock the power of the lines, and it was here that we would attempt to do the same. We began to explore the area, searching for any clue that Campbell might have left behind, any sign that could lead us to the missing segment of the video. Moira moved with a purpose, her eyes scanning the ground, the stones, the spaces in between, as if she were searching for something only she could see. "There," she said, pointing to a small, almost imperceptible mark on one of the stones. "A symbol. It's a marker of some kind." He was trying to leave a message. The symbol was barely visible, etched into the weathered surface of the stone. It was a series of lines arranged in a pattern that I recognized. "It's the same pattern as the birthmark," I said, my voice filled with excitement. "And the inscription on the record." "The musical key," Ellie added. "He was trying to tell us something," Liam said, his eyes fixed on the symbol. "Something about the music, about the hidden frequency." As we examined the symbol more closely, we noticed other markings, smaller, fainter, hidden beneath the moss and lichen. They were numbers, arranged in a sequence. "Coordinates," Ellie said, pulling out her phone to check. "They point to somewhere. Nearby, another circle, smaller, hidden in the woods. A focal point," Moira explained. "A place where the energy of the lines is concentrated, where the ritual can be amplified." It was clear what we had to do. We had to go to this hidden circle. We had to find whatever Campbell had left there. But as we turned to leave, we heard a sound that made our blood run cold. A low, chanting sound coming from the edge of the woods. We froze, our eyes darting around, trying to locate the source of the sound. And then we saw them. Figures, emerging from the shadows, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods, their bodies draped in long, flowing robes. They were chanting in a language I didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a ritual, and they were coming for us. "The Guardians," Moira whispered, her eyes wide with alarm. "They know we're here." "What do we do?" Liam asked, his hand tightening around his walking stick. "We run," I said. We turned and fled, the chanting growing louder behind us, the figures emerging from the woods, their movements swift and silent. We ran through the darkness, stumbling over uneven ground, our lungs burning, our hearts pounding. We could hear the pursuit close behind, the rustle of robes, the soft thud of footsteps on the damp earth. We reached the edge of the circle, the chanting growing louder, the figures closing in. We were trapped. Then Moira stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "Go!" she shouted, turning to face our pursuers. "I'll hold them off." "But," I began. "There's no time," she cried. "Go to the other circle. Find what you're looking for. It's your only chance." And then, she did something that I will never forget. she began to sing. It was a strange, haunting melody, filled with a power that seemed to resonate with the very air around us. The chanting of the figures faltered, their movements slowing, as if they were struggling against an invisible force. It was the counter-melody, the musical key. Moira was using it to disrupt their ritual, to break their connection to the lines. But it wasn't enough. There were too many of them. They surged forward, their chanting growing louder, more insistent, overpowering Moira's song. They surrounded her, their dark robes swirling around her like a vortex. "Run!" she cried, her voice strained. "Now!" We hesitated for a moment, torn between our desire to help her and the need to escape. But we knew she was right. We had to go. We turned and ran, leaving Moira behind to face the Guardians alone. We ran through the woods, the sounds of the pursuit fading behind us. The image of Moira, surrounded by the hooded figures, seared into our minds. We ran until we could run no more, until we reached the hidden circle, the focal point, the place where the energy of the lines was concentrated. It was a small, intimate space, surrounded by a thick grove of trees. In the center stood a single ancient stone, covered in carvings, its surface pulsing with a faint inner light. And beside it, we found something else. A metal box, half buried in the earth. It was old and rusted, but it was still intact. With trembling hands, we opened the box. Inside, we found a collection of documents, notes, and photographs. Alistair Campbell's lost research, and among the papers, a single, unlabeled videotape. The missing segment of The Lines That Connect Us. We had found it, but our victory was short-lived. Suddenly the air grew heavy, the energy in the circle intensified, and the chanting began again, closer this time, surrounding us. The Guardians had found us. They emerged from the trees, their faces hidden, their robes swirling around them like shadows. They formed a circle around us, their chanting growing louder, more powerful, more menacing. And then I understood. They weren't just trying to stop us. They were trying to use us. "He is the key," one of the figures said, his voice distorted by the hood pointing at me. "His blood, his lineage. It is time to complete the circle." Moira's words came back to me then. "You, Josh, you are the key to finding it. Because of your family," she had said. "Your ancestry." They knew. Somehow, they knew about my connection to this place, to the lines. They were going to use me to complete the ritual. They were going to use me to unlock the full power of the lines. I was the final piece of the puzzle, and I had walked right into their trap. Surrounded by the chanting figures, the weight of my impending fate pressed down on me. I was the key, the final piece of their twisted puzzle. My lineage, my connection to this place, to the lines, it all led to this. They were going to use me to complete the ritual, to unleash the full power of infinite harmony. "You cannot resist," the lead figure intoned, his voice echoing in the small clearing. "The lines have chosen you. The cycle must be completed." Panic clawed at me. I looked at Ellie and Liam, their faces pale with terror, and knew we couldn't let this happen. We had to fight back, even if it seemed hopeless. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is this? Ritual?" "We are the guardians of the connection," he responded, his voice devoid of emotion. "And we serve the lines. They connect us all, across time, across space. And through you, they will connect us all once more, on a scale never before imagined." He gestured to the stone in the center of the circle. "This is the focal point," he explained. "The nexus. Here, the energy of the lines is strongest. And here, the veil between worlds is thinnest." They intended to use the focal point, amplified by my Ajanyet connection to the lines, to somehow merge or connect everyone, perhaps even everything. The potential consequences were unimaginable. As the Guardians began to close in, their chanting growing louder and more intense, I saw Ellie move. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You're insane!" she shouted, her voice ringing out in the clearing. "You can't control people like this. It's wrong." Her words, though brave, were met only with cold indifference. The Guardians continued their advance, their chanting reaching a fever pitch. Then, Liam stepped forward, his walking stick raised like a weapon. "Leave them alone," he growled, his voice filled with a primal fury. He swung his stick, striking one of the figures. Across the chest, the figure staggered back, but the others kept coming, unfazed. It was clear that physical force wouldn't be enough. We were trapped, outmatched, and out of time. The ritual was about to begin. Then, I remembered the tape. The missing segment of the video. Alistair Campbell's last recording. It was still in my bag, tucked away for safekeeping. Could it hold the answer? Could it show us how to stop the ritual? I fumbled with the bag, my hands shaking, and pulled out the tape. It was our last hope, our only chance. "Ellie!" I shouted. "The tape! We need to play it!" Ellie understood immediately. She grabbed my laptop, the one we'd used to decrypt Thatcher's files, and connected a portable video player we'd thankfully thought to bring. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. As the Guardians began to form a circle around me, their chanting reaching a crescendo, I inserted the tape into the player and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and Alistair Campbell's face appeared, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. He was standing in the stone circle, the altar of connections, the same place where we had found the remnants of his camera. "The lines," he said, his voice breathless. "They're real. They connect us all. But it's not what they say. It's not a gift. It's a curse." He looked around, as if he were being watched, then leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're coming for me," he said. "The Guardians. They know I've seen too much. They know I understand the truth. The truth about the lines," he continued. "They don't just connect us. They control us. They feed on us. They drain us of our will, our individuality, our very essence." "The ritual," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "It's not about connection. It's about consumption. They're trying to merge us all into one, a single, undifferentiated mass, a hive mind controlled by them." He paused, then looked directly at the camera, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. "You have to stop them," he said. "You have to break the cycle before it's too late." The video ended abruptly, the screen dissolving into static. But it was enough. We finally understood the true nature of the ritual, the true purpose of the lines. It wasn't about unity or enlightenment. It was about control, about domination, about the annihilation of individual consciousness. And I was the key. As the Guardians began to chant, their voices merging into a single, hypnotic drone, I felt a strange sensation, a tingling in my limbs, a buzzing in my head. It was the same feeling I had experienced when listening to Eterna, but stronger, more intense. I could feel the energy of the lines flowing through me, connecting me to the stones, to the earth, to the chanting figures around me. I was becoming part of the ritual, whether I wanted to or not. Then, I remembered Moira's betrayal. She had said her defection was a ruse, to get close to me, to deliver me to the Guardians. I had been a fool to trust her, but why? Why had she pretended to help us, only to lead us into a trap? What was her real motive? As the chanting grew louder, the energy more intense, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure emerged from the shadows, walking towards the circle. It was Moira, but she wasn't a prisoner. She was leading them. She was one of them. She had always been one of them. "Moira!" I shouted, my voice filled with betrayal and rage. "What are you doing?" She stopped before me, her eyes cold and empty. "Completing the cycle," she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "As we were always meant to." She raised her hand and the chanting stopped. The silence was deafening. "It's time," she said. The Guardians closed in, their hands outstretched, their eyes fixed on me. I could feel the energy of the lines coursing through my veins, pulling me in, threatening to consume me. Then, Ellie did something unexpected. She stepped in front of me, shielding me from the Guardians, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "No," she said, her voice ringing out in the clearing. "I won't let you do this." She raised my laptop, the one containing Thatcher's files, and smashed it to the ground. "What are you doing?" I cried, horrified. "Stopping them," she replied, her voice resolute. "Thatcher's research, the counter-melody, It's all in here. If they can't access it, they can't complete the ritual. It was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to disrupt the ceremony. But it worked, for a moment. The Guardians faltered, their connection to the lines disrupted. They looked at each other, confused, their chanting replaced by a low, guttural growl. But it wasn't enough. The energy was still there, still flowing through me, still threatening to pull me under. Then, I remembered the inscription, the musical key, the counter melody. I had sung it before, to disrupt the music, to break the hold of the hidden frequency. Could I use it again? Could I use it to break the cycle, to sever the connection, to set us free? I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and began to sing. The melody flowed from me, a pure, clear sound that cut through the chanting of the Guardians, through the energy of the lines, through the darkness that threatened to consume us all. It was a song of defiance, a song of hope, a song of freedom. As I sang, I felt the energy shift, the connection weaken. The chanting faltered, the figures stumbled, their movements becoming erratic, their expressions contorted in pain. The lines were breaking. The cycle was unraveling. I kept singing, pouring all my strength, all my will into the melody. I sang, until my voice was hoarse, until my lungs burned, until my vision blurred, and then, silence. The chanting stopped. The energy dissipated. The figures collapsed to the ground, their bodies convulsing, then lying still. The ritual was over. We had won, but the victory was short-lived. As the dust settled, I saw Moira standing over me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and regret. "It's not over," she whispered. "The cycle cannot be broken. It will begin again, and next time, we will be ready." Then she turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness, leaving us alone in the silent circle. In the aftermath, we contacted the authorities, and the remaining members of the sect were apprehended. The story made headlines around the world, though the details were heavily sanitized, the true nature of the events concealed from the public. Liam helped us understand more of what Alistair had learned, and helped to fill in gaps in our own understanding. Ellie and I returned to our lives, forever changed by what we had experienced. We had stared into the abyss, and the abyss had stared back. We had seen the power of the lines, the seductive allure of the hidden frequency, and the terrifying potential for control that lay within. As for me, I was left with the knowledge, the burden of my connection to the lines. I could still feel them, sometimes, a faint hum beneath the surface of my awareness, a reminder of the power that lay dormant within me, waiting to be awakened. I also couldn't stop thinking about Ellie's sacrifice, destroying Thatcher's files, and what it meant for our future, and hers. In the end, I decided to publish my own account of the events, a detailed article that exposed the Resonance Initiative and their plans. But I omitted the most dangerous details, the truth about the lines, the counter melody, and my own role in the events. Some secrets, I realized, were best kept hidden. The video, or what remained of it, was secured, locked away, its power neutralized, hopefully forever. But the memory of the music, the allure of the hidden frequency, and the threat of the Guardians remained. As I looked out at the world, at the endless stream of information, of sound and images that flowed around us every day, I couldn't help but wonder if the cycle had truly been broken, or if it was just beginning again, in a new form, a new guise. Perhaps the lines were still there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for someone to unlock their power once more. Perhaps the song that never ends was simply playing on, in a different key, waiting for its next listener. And perhaps one day I would have to sing again. But for now, there was only silence, an eternal silence, filled with the echoes of the past and the promise of an uncertain future. A future where the lines might reemerge, where the music might play again, and where the fate of humanity might once again hang in the balance.